We are very blessed today to have with us virtually from Ananda Village, live streaming, our dear, dear longtime friends, Ananda Worldwide Spiritual Directors, Nayaswamis, Jyotish, and Devi. And we are, of course, sad in one way that they couldn't be here with us today in person, but very, very happy that they could join us for this special occasion. Thank you for being with us, Jyotish.
Thank you. It's really a joy to be able to be with you. We too, Padma, wish that we could be there in person.
And we're so happy that at least we can join you in this way. And we saw on your newsletter that you had a children's play day outside, and we hope the children are having lots of fun while the parents are inside having lots of fun as well.
So let the fun begin, I guess. So I'll begin and then Devi will also speak, but let me start by reading Whispers from passage from Whispers from Eternity. These, as you know, are prayer demands by Yoganandaji, and they just cover every facet of the spiritual life. This one we want to read today is, I want to build a rainbow bridge of self-realization. The gulf of ages lay between thee and me, widening as the waters of my oblivion of thee grew through centuries. I stand on this rocky shore of matter, gazing out over the gulf, hoping to see beyond thy smooth shores of peace. My inner thought architects will build for me a bridge of constant remembrance of thee. The strong mental girders of self-control now are being riveted together. My dreams of thee gather to make a rainbow bridge of self-realization over which very soon I shall reach thy shore. Just a beautiful, his prayers are just so lovely and apt. Devi and I have been for a year or so having a habit of ending our meditation by reading one of these silently, of course, in our own meditation, and then meditating on the deep, deep thoughts behind it. But more than just the thoughts, meditating on the vibration. Here is, it's so beautifully expressed, that yearning of the heart for God, that there's a gulf between us and where we're trying to reach, and that the rocky shores that we are on are not very fulfilling. And we want to reach across that gulf that lies. And it's, of course, a self-created gulf in a certain sense, but in another sense, it's not self-created. It's a universal mass delusion of which we're a part. And today's reading from both from the affirmations book, this topic, and also from the rays of the one light, expresses this so very, very well. It's that kind of, I don't know, one might say a journey of consciousness. The journey takes place not physically over miles and miles, but it takes place as a journey of consciousness. And in that journey of consciousness, there are certain waypoints, one might say, certain attitudes, certain deep feelings and desires. At first, kind of to put it in Swami's reading, at first we yearn for those rainbow bubbles of the material world. They look so shiny, so wonderful. Oh, if only we could have that, if only we could have that. But as soon as you grasp a bubble, what happens? It breaks. I remember being many years ago down by Everett on the pier down there, and somebody had a great, huge kind of a hoop. Maybe you've seen this, and they were dipping it in a soapy solution. And then because there was a breeze just of the right strength, they would move that, and there was a huge bubble, maybe 4 feet in diameter, and it just drifted over the water until finally it got close to shore, and then it burst. But it was beautiful. While we were watching it, of course, everybody was entranced and cheering, but inevitably the bubble burst, and inevitably we're disappointed. And so over a long period of experiences such as that, as Master said, those experiences begin to take on a certain anguishing monotony, because they never quite fulfill. They always promise, but they never fulfill. Master also said, you may be sure of one thing: Maya delusion never keeps its promises, and it doesn't keep its promises. And so gradually the soul begins to yearn more and more for a solution that will allow us to transcend that. And then we become like the woman in the passage from the Bible. We realize that we have a sickness. Our sickness may not be a hemorrhage, but we have a spiritual sickness. And we realize not only that we have that we've had it for a long time, but most importantly, we realize that we can't cure ourselves on our own by our own efforts. We need help. And so we reach out toward the guru, in her case, Jesus, in our case, probably Master. But Swami had a very important line in there. He said, self-effort is needed as to magnetically draw on the divine power. So our part is not to do the healing, but to magnetically draw on the power that can heal us. And so that drawing on the power of the guru is that constitutes a sea change, a watershed. That's the beginning of the building of that rainbow bridge that Master was talking about, that we realize that we've got to get to that shore in order to be fulfilled, in order to be healed of our spiritual ignorance. And so as we begin that journey, it starts out as seeming that we're doing all the work. We're having to gather the stones. We're having to put down the causeway. We're having to do all of the work to build that rainbow bridge, the girders and all of that. And so that sense of, I am doing this, but I am doing it in order to reach your shores, is the stage of deep discipleship on the part. There has to be in our mind the sense that I am going to do the work, I'm going to do the self-effort, I'm going to do whatever it takes to reach those shores. And so in that sense is what Krishna was talking about in the passage from the Gita. He said, meditate on me as those who meditate on me as their very own. I will make whole their deficiencies and render permanent their gains. But that meditate on me as their very own. So that beginning of I-thou relationship, and probably you've experienced this in meditation, most of us have, is that you start out thinking of masters outside, maybe looking at his picture, maybe praying to him, maybe trying to yearn for Divine Mother, whatever that prayer is. But gradually, as your mind calms, you begin to get behind that reaching out, and you begin to feel that Master is not out there. Divine Mother is not out there. She is inside. She is your very own. And you don't have to beg, and you don't have to pray, and you don't have to be worried, and you don't have to fret, and you don't have to think that you've done something bad and that you're guilty and you're not worthy, and all those egoic delusions. You just don't need to hold them. And you begin to feel that Master, that Divine Mother, they're your very own. They want your liberation more than you want your liberation, because they realize what it is. You know, many of us probably have heard the teaching that our part, self-effort, is 25% of the whole. 25% is done by the Guru on our behalf, and 50% by the grace of God. And so that 75% that is not attached to our ego at all, except is drawn magnetically by the self-effort. So the self-effort is really more to draw that grace. And then finally, we begin to realize that even that 25% is not really ours. We're just actors. It's the divine doing it all. The divine is playing the Guru. The divine is playing us. The divine is doing 100% of it, not 50 or 75%. And then as that begins to, that realization, and it isn't just of the mind, it isn't of the intellect. It has to be a kind of a deeper realization. And that's why meditation is so important, because unless we back off from chasing those rainbow bubbles, unless we have a spirit of true renunciation where we say, others can do that. I've been there, done that, and it hasn't worked. As that takes a deep resonance within us, then we begin to meditate not to the Guru, not to Divine Mother, but as Master instructed Dr. Lewis, he said, "You're meditating wrong." And Dr. Lewis said, what do you mean? He said, "You're meditating to God. You should be meditating in God." And so we need also, like Dr. Lewis, or as one presumes, since he told the story, he probably did realize and begin the practice of meditating in God. So as we meditate in God, then instead of Krishna being my very own, like reaching out, he's my very own friend, he's my very own Guru, he becomes my very own self. He is me ultimately. There's only one. And that the one actor is and always is God alone. But we have to gradually come to the point where we realize that. And as we do, then we begin to disengage, one might say, from it. It isn't even self-effort anymore. It's just, it doesn't take any self-effort to eat ice cream if you've got a wonderful bowl of ice cream in front of you. That's easy. The self-effort is not to do that. When we begin to experience being inside of God, it doesn't take effort anymore. It takes effort to not be there, to not feel that. And so this beautiful journey that we're on has many stages and many avenues to it, but gradually it will result in the dissolving of the ego and in the realization that we are God. And then, as the Gita says in another passage, said, being established in yoga, being established in that consciousness, then go forth and act. And that's the right kind of self-effort.
Thank you, Jyotish. That was very enjoyable and inspiring to listen to. I'll also share a few thoughts with you. I think many of you know Jyotish and I write a weekly blog, A Touch of Light. And in last week's blog that I wrote, I shared a dream that one of our resident members here at Ananda Village had, Dr. Peter, for those of you who know him, remarkable human being. And in this dream, he was walking along a beach, and in his hand, he found a little child's plastic bucket and a little shovel. And then right before him, he saw this huge mound of black, tarry material. And he understood that this was his past karma that he had to remove in order to move forward spiritually. And he looked at the little bucket and the little shovel, and he started kind of knocking away at it, but just could get just a little bit in his bucket. But he kept at it and he kept at it. And then he heard this big noise on the other side of the mound, and he went around behind, and there was Master sitting on a backhoe with a great big shovel, and he was scooping up big buckets full of this tar, we call it tarma, and throwing it into the ocean. And Peter understood that Master was doing the major part of the work. But the important thing is, Peter also understood that he had to keep on with his effort. That even though his efforts seemed so ineffective, it was his effort and his prayers for help that drew the grace of the Master to help him work out his karma. So those two things are very important for us to think about, that by our own effort and by our prayers for help, we draw that response, we draw that grace. And that story from the Bible is so beautiful because the crowds were pressing all around Jesus. But one woman went up with deep faith, with deep magnetic drawing, and Jesus immediately felt power had gone out of him, meaning his grace had gone out, not that he was diminished in any way. But this is what we need to understand. So many people over the years since Swamiji has passed have said to us regretfully, oh, we never got to meet him, we're so sorry. Well, we have to understand the opportunity to draw the grace of Master, who none of us knew, and of Swamiji, who some of us knew. It's a magnetic exchange. They don't have to be in the body. I remember this was 2003, when Swami was just first establishing Ananda in India. And he was giving a big talk at a public venue. There were several thousand people there. And afterwards, people were just like Jesus. They were thronging around him and pushing, and just he could barely get out of the building. And then when he got back into his car, Swami was hard of hearing, so he wore hearing aids. And in his pocket, he carried a wand, which was a remote adjuster of the hearing aids. Well, one of those people pressing around stole the wand. They thought it was a cell phone or something. And it took Swami a lot of effort to get that wand shipped to him back in India. And so did that man touch Swami? He got to be right next to him, but I think he got some very bad karma for that action. So it isn't physical proximity. It's how you draw, how you relate with humility, but with deep faith. Another one of my favorite stories from the Bible is when this Roman centurion, a Roman soldier, comes, who was not at all a follower of Jesus. He was a Roman soldier established there in Jerusalem. And he comes to Jesus and he says, Teacher, a servant in my household who has been with my family for many years is dying. Can you help him? And Jesus said, I will come. Not at all his follower, not destined to become a Christian or a disciple. And the man said, no, the centurion said, you don't need to come. Just knowing that you are praying for him, I know he will be cured. And Jesus looked at him very deeply. And he said, by your faith, your servant is already cured. And the man left and went home. And sure enough, the man was fine. So what was that happened? He wasn't a follower, a believer, but he saw something of God in Christ. And he knew how to, through his humble, magnetic faith, he drew the power of the great ones. And this is what we have to remember. Our part, we have to do our part, just as Peter had to keep scraping that tar into his little bucket, even though Master was doing the lion's share. Still, he had to do his part. We have to do our part to find God. We can't expect it all to come from the grace of the group of the masters. But with faith, with magnetic calling, that's how we draw that grace. And then the passage from the Gita, it's actually one, I love it. I don't know why, it's very poetic, one of my favorites, but it says, for those who with incessant worship, unceasing worship. What does unceasing worship mean? It isn't the form. Christ said there are many those who say, oh, Rabbi, Rabbi, but they are not my followers. So it isn't outward. That's the important thing to remember. Incessant worship is the heart and the mind ever moving to the pole star of God and Guru, waking, sleeping, the Master's beautiful poem, God, 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 eating, worshiping, all the things we do my mind will constantly hum, unheard by any, God, God, God. And, we did have the good karma to be around Swamiji. But most of the time, or a great deal of the time, we didn't talk. We didn't talk about business or issues or problems. He was blessing us with his consciousness in stillness, in quiet. And incessant worship, that's what it means. It means to always be having your mind turning towards God inwardly. Let everything you see remind you of God. We have a little pool outside our house with a little waterfall, and it's so beautiful in the dry weather now in California. Lots of little animals come and they drink there, little squirrels and little birds and hummingbirds, and it's just lovely. And this morning, this little squirrel came, and it was very, very interesting because in India, the squirrels are different. They have 2 stripes down their back. And the story is that Lord Rama, one of the squirrels, helped them build the bridge to Ravana's home and to rescue Sita. And Rama picked up the little squirrel and stroked his back. And because of that, there are 2 stripes on the back of the squirrel. Well, this morning, at our little pool outside our house, there was a little Indian squirrel. I don't know what it was, but had two little stripes on his back. And so everything you can look at, try to see, that's God. That's Master smiling at me through that little hummingbird that came and looked right in my face. That's Master talking to me through this sweet friend that brought me a cup of coffee, whatever it is. But just that's what incessant worship is. It's inward, developing that deep inner awareness through meditation and focus and bringing your whole being to God. God doesn't mind our faults. It hurts my heart sometimes because people are ashamed of their past mistakes, their present failures, and so they hold back from God. Bring to God everything. Bring to him your failures. Bring to him your mistakes. He likes that because then he knows that you're saying, you're my own. You're my very dearest of the dear and nearest of the near. And so by doing that incessant worship, then as the quote from the Gita goes on that we mentioned earlier, I make whole their law, make good their deficits, and make permanent their gains. So we are walking a rainbow bridge to God and Guru. And each step of the way is paved with our love, with our incessant worship, with our magnetic calling on them to be with us. And if we can do that, then life becomes so sweet. We look at the world around us now. It's hard to read the news. There's very little good news. There's very little of hope. But if we can just remember, even in seeing the tragedies that are happening all over the world, just say, Divine Mother, you are with us, and you will see us through these times if we can stand with that magnetic faith, as that woman did who just touched the hem of Christ's garment. If inwardly we can touch the hem of our Guru, of our masters, then inwardly we draw that grace that will see us through whatever comes. So, my friends, we're very happy we could be with you to share these thoughts. And we hope that we can come and visit I know we will at some point in the future when the pandemic subsides. But till then, let's be joined together in God and Guru, in incessant worship, in deep devotion, and magnetically ask for God's healing to come to our planet. Jai Guru.
Jai Guru. And by God's grace, I hope that we can be there next year and see all of our dear friends and be able to be together in person. God bless you.